recently I started writing songs again after quite a break. And I had cause to consider the idea of copyright and ask the question, to whom does copyright belong? A few things occur to me. These things are quite straightforward, but thinking about them maybe confuses the issue somewhat. It seems to me that without my body, I wouldn't be writing the songs, wouldn't be doing anything. But I didn't create my body, so it could be argued, or maybe it's obvious if we're going to have such a thing as copyright, that my parents must surely be entitled, and their parents before them, and their parents before them, until we end up back at source. It's just one point. Another thing that occurred to me is the melody of these songs. I didn't create the scale. I've been influenced by innumerable writers and music generally. I didn't come up with my own scale. I could have, with not using the chromatic scale as we know it, the major scale. I could have come up with something else, but most people would have thought that sounds out of tune. Maybe they get used to it, but I didn't. I used what was already there. So surely then some of the copyright must go to whoever came up with the scale. But that's impossible because it goes back to source again. These songs I've been writing, for the project title I called it Not Quite the Blues. So I was using basically blues changes, but hopefully with something a little bit interesting, so not quite the blues. But nonetheless, all those chords and all those changes, you've heard them all before, a different configuration. They're not mine. So, copyright again, it seems to me it's got to go back to source. The lyric, the words, not my words. I was born in this country and I speak English, and influenced by all the songs I've heard, phrases that you'll have heard before. So again, is that really mine, or how are you going to divvy that out? Really, it goes back to source. If you go back to source, it seems at the moment that we all came from not one couple. Seems like it must be. So everybody then is a cousin, a nephew, a niece, everybody's a relative. If we follow that line of, it's not really thinking, that line of realization perhaps, then it seems that copyright resides with everybody. The idea of copyright changes over the years, it seems to me, and it's mostly arbitrary, so it's an idea. I want to go a little bit further. I'm going to ask, what about the ideas, the imagination and the thoughts? Surely they're mine. But I've noticed something about them, and it's that they're rather like clouds. So a cloud will come into view, and I see it. It might trigger something. I might think, oh, that reminds me of when I was with my first girlfriend, wherever, and then thoughts follow and feelings, and so it's a cloud. But the vision of the cloud impacts on some aspect of me. The cloud isn't mine. Most people wouldn't say the cloud is theirs. And likewise with thoughts and imagination, I see them. So are they mine. We tend to think that things outside our skin are not, though there's the notion of possession, obviously. But looking at these things, I don't see it as any different. Where do I draw the line? At my skin? I've looked at the emanation and gestation of thoughts and ideas. If you're a songwriter, you're perhaps in a position to do. If you're a songwriter, you're perhaps in a position to do that more than maybe some other people. And the truth of it is, having watched where they come from, thoughts, ideas, I can't say they're mine. In some ways, I think this is quite plain and perhaps quite simple. Thinking about it confuses it somewhat because we're all conditioned to have this idea of ownership, and we go along with it where we work in the world. I charge for my services, not much, and I consider in that way that I own things, but they will go. I have a feeling that I have a sense of a sea change regarding the idea of ownership, which I find quite heartening. We'll see. So, to whom does copyright belong? I think looking at it in this simple way, it must belong to all of us, surely. I'd like to go a bit further. If you feel drawn to explore this kind of inner noticing, I'd like to offer a couple of quotes which may be of some use. Here's the first. Western knowledge looks toward the outside. Eastern wisdom looks toward the inside. But if we look within the way we look without, we make an outer of the inner. If I may go through that. Western knowledge looks towards the outside. We all love it. Measuring, looking, developing, quanta, eternity, infinity. Fine. Eastern wisdom, I don't know much about it. Well, in my own way maybe, looks towards the inside. The thoughts, the feelings, the ideas, the way the outside impacts on some aspect. What is that aspect? But if we look within, the way we look without, with the same procedure, the same mechanism, we make an outer of the inner. To me, that means if you're looking at these inner things, okay, you see the cloud, it registers. We know by now that it's electric signals and an image is made. Well, where's that? That image must be made in here. So that outer is kind of already inner, but something perceives that image. A thought is apparent to us. Imagination is apparent to us. So in that sense, emotions are apparent to us, feelings, everything apparent to us. So in that sense, I would call them outer as well. If you're looking for a deeper inner, looking in that way, whether it be thoughts or a cloud or a mountain or a feeling, it's still outer. You make an outer of the inner if you look in that way. So you might ask, what are you to do? I'll offer you another quote. This one is attributed to St. Francis of Assisi. I don't know. Doesn't matter. The quote is, in regard to these things, what you're looking for is where you're looking from. So I would add that you'll never find it, because no matter where you look, it's where you're looking from. So that mechanism of looking that we've become used to, conditioned if you like, used to, is of no use. You end up in an infinity of thought. You end up with a thought seeing a thought, not realizing, thinking that you've seen it, thinking that you've seen it, that the thing that's seen it is a thought as well. What you're looking for is where you're looking from. How do you find where you're looking from? In my experience, all this is my experience, I'm not offering any religion, any set thing at all. I may be suggesting you have a little look. Why don't you? Why not? Because everything reports to this aspect, so your whole life reports there. So why not? Have a look. How would I suggest you go about having a look? Well, I think being quiet and noticing things that maybe you've never noticed before, that aren't talked about much, that your parents probably didn't notice, that your parents' parents didn't notice, and on it goes, generation under generation. Is there something that's being missed? When this aspect of yourself is recognized, some people instantly it seems, or some people slowly, starts to become recognized, then everything changes. Little by little maybe, subtly, but nothing is untouched, because the very seat of perception starts to be recognized, and the perceptions themselves lose their weight to some extent, or are seen in a new light. And seeing is nearly everything in our life is perception, then nothing is untouched. You might ask, what's the point? I don't think there is one. What's the point in a caterpillar pupating? I think it's what happens to different people at different times, like the caterpillar, like the fruit ripening. And then the reason I'm saying this then is kind of as an encouragement to those who might be starting to see this kind of thing. And it can be quite disturbing, because everything that you've known is not quite the same. Sometimes radically different. All depends, everybody's different. So to whom does copyright belong, really? I think to everyone. Possibly everything. Here comes the cat. My cat.